Hey everybody, Adam Savage, and I'm at the National Parks Museum Conservation Lab, where we are spending some time covering just a small smidgen of the vast array of projects they tackle here in this building. And I'm here with Sutton. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Sutton, what are we looking at today?
All right, well today I have for you a Union Civil War kepi that's from the Petersburg National Battlefield. So
A kepi?
Yes.
Is that the hat?
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
hat with the squished front. So let me pull this out.
Oh, wow.
So here we go. Yeah, and right now it's in the tray I custom built for it. So that way this side stays in place so it keeps the kepi from shifting in the box, but then it can be removed so that way it can just easily slide out.
Where is this within its restoration?
So this one's completely treated.
Okay.
It came to us looking like this. So
Oh, with the brim completely detached.
the leather visor is completely off, and there is some corrosion on some of the metal components. This is the interior silk lining. It's a little hard to see, but the interior was just torn into pieces and all crumpled out of orientation. There's a couple losses of the silk lining itself, and probably also the main thing you notice is it has this big bullet hole.
Oh, that's a bullet hole in the top of the head.
Yeah, this hat was worn by Lieutenant James Roantree. He actually sought out a commission to lead a colored troop. So in 1864, he was assigned the 43rd United States Colored Troop, and he was part of the campaign to try to take over Petersburg and Richmond. So his role was to help take over a supply road. And during this attack isn't really clear how it panned out, but there's accounts saying that he either asked his men to lay prone or lead a forward charge. And so that's then how a bullet ended up piercing the top of his kepi, because yes, he was laying forward or leaning forward. So yeah, very unfortunate ending to his story, but knowing that we were able to be like, okay, well, this hole is important to keep it as it is, whereas all these other issues we need to address.
And stabilize.
Yeah, because these are likely occurring after his story and his time, and also you want to stabilize those, that way you can safely handle it and display it, and then now it's all one piece, so it's visually uniting the object, therefore you can interpret it better.
That's really cool. It's actually a philosophical stance to keep the bullet hole as something to highlight.
Yeah, typically when we get an object, we want to do research into it if possible.
Right.
And try to make sure we know like what's important to the story itself. And we work a lot with curators and other historians, so that way maybe they can help us identify these important aspects and keep them, because although what we try to do is as reversible as possible, stuff like that also might be better, like if we aren't really sure what that is, just to leave it as it is.
Sure.
Too.
Don't mess with things too much in general. I'm curious about the metallic on this front. It is a really, really beautiful, and looks like in great shape.
Yes, that is metal embroidery. So they've actually taken gold and wrapped it around threads to do the, it's called bullion, and then there's sequencing. It's just tarnished as it ages. Yeah, it's relatively really good.
Do you guys have issues with stabilizing corrosion you can't see with an arrangement like this? Do you go over it with something as a solvent to take off the tarnish?
Some of the tarnishing we leave because in this case it's pretty much protecting that underlying metal. So like when you're polishing silverware at home, you are essentially removing layers of that metal. So eventually you're going to wear it down, and especially to take away any details. So in this case, it's best to just leave like the tarnishing, but address problematic corrosion products.
Gotcha.
And so I did end up just lightly using a cotton swab with a little bit of mineral spirits and ethanol, just to like remove some of the dirt from the top. Obviously, since it's attached to the textile, it limits what we can get to.
Yeah.
And then using skewers for the little divots here and there.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, other than that, just kind of leaving it as it is and hoping that there isn't like an underlying issue in this case.
Copy. And in this case, it really looks like it's in spectacular condition.
Yeah, it looks really good.
All right, so how do you go, talk to me about some of the stabilization you had to do on the brim and the visor.
Yeah. All right, so first I'm going to take it off because most of my work is on the underside. So first off, I wanted to address the inside of the cap because that was the most fragile place, and before attaching the visor, I want to make sure it itself is well and secured. So to start with, I had to humidify those silk fragments. That way I can move them back into the original position and see like what I'm working with, like where it's actually missing and what's just needing to be like aligned better.
So the default is to use humidity to add a little flexibility before touching anything.
Yep, just so that way it's you can just like kind of massage it back into place instead of just like forcing it, because sometimes these materials can be really fragile, and that little bit of flexibility will help. And so once all those tears were aligned, I made underlays to secure those tears together, mainly to help prevent it from tearing further in the future. And the underlay I chose was silk crapelin, so it's compatible and lightweight. And the strips of crapelin was embedded with Lasco adhesive. And it's a nice thermoplastic. That way I could use a small tacking iron and just gently attach those strips to both sides of the tear to align them and secure them. And so then once those tears were secured, I wanted to apply an overlay. So just a nice lightweight material that can help protect that lining from snagging. And to do that involves several steps. So first I had to create a pattern of that internal structure. So kind of like a sewing pattern. And then I translated it into like muslin to make sure that I had the correct fit and size and the shapes that I needed to make.
And that's just sewing and placing.
Yep, sewing and placing. So for the final product, I chose Stable Tex. It's a lightweight material, and it's sheer enough where you could still see the embossing for the manufacturer as well. And then the other, probably the most important part, is that it's made out of polyester. So we can melt it and create this nice weld line to make seams. Yes. And so that's really cool, and it would be really difficult to achieve with just sewing yourself.
I was going to say, so do you have a sonic welder here?
No. What we have is this little heat tool here. And so, and we can change the temperature on the dial over there. But what you particularly need is a nice perpendicular edge for this. That's the key to it all. And so you'll just take your two strips that you want to weld together, and you have the downward force. So that way you're really squishing those two pieces together. And then you simply just drag your hot tool across the edge, and that not only just cuts off the excess material, but then you got a really nice edge with not a lot of excess at your seam line.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, and it's pretty great. And then also, since you've now melted it, it will reduce the risk of it fraying over time. So, look at
that is so much fun.
So yeah, and it's pretty durable.
It really is.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of what you guys do are sort of semi-magic tricks.
Yeah, it's a lot of that does, and it works out when we have like, because I mean these were all custom dyed, and so it's like when you're able to do the whole dyeing process and make another color, and you have the right material that just blends in, it works out great. And we want our work to be like hidden for the most part.
Right. So this liner though is a dark. So this liner is a different color than that.
Yes, I did this because it's a little easier to see for our demonstration.
Oh,
today.
Beautiful! Excellent.
Yeah,
You're a natural science communicator. Sutton, thank you so much for walking me through this process. It's really fascinating. Thank you guys so much for watching. One of my favorite things we make in our tested store are demerit badges. These are like scout badges, but for screwing stuff up, because screwing up is not just a part of the making process, it is intrinsic to it, and we like to celebrate that. We've got 27 so far in the Supervisors bundle that you can go buy right now by clicking on the link in the description, but we also have a booster pack of some brand new patches. This is the demerit badge for burning off your eyebrow. I am proudly sewing that to all of my clothes. This is the demerit badge for having a messy workbench, which I do not get today. My workbench is super clean. And we have new octagonal patches that are, merit badges. This is the merit badge for sweeping up your shop, Congratulations. I'm so proud of you. And this, oh my God, this is great. This is the merit badge for creating a clean space on your bench. Hey, we got to take our successes where they come and meet them there. Go to the tested-store.com or adamsavage.com to buy any of these, or click on a link in the description.